What's up guys, Edwin Santos here, and today I'll be giving you guys a tutorial on how to create a full DVD cover. Now, this is a full DVD cover that you guys can make from scratch on Photoshop. And this can be for a class project, or a group movie, or even just to make for fun. So in this video, I'll be going through three main topics that you'll go into making your cover. With the first topic over here being your main blueprint, which is essentially just your general outline and the background of your cover. The second topic being typography, which in short is just all the text that will be appearing in the background or on the foreground of your cover. And lastly, some design tips, which will just be a brief rundown on some effects that you guys can apply on Photoshop, just to give your cover that extra bit of pizzazz, just to make it a bit more appealing. So with that being said, let's go over to the first step. Okay, moving on to the first topic. So as I said before, the first topic of your DVD cover is your main blueprint and background. So as you guys can see on the screen, I've created a graph which essentially breaks down this section into three different categories, as it's fairly lengthy to explain in one go. So to start off, when creating your background, you want to think about the theme of your movie, as this is what essentially your whole background revolves around. So some general questions you may want to ask yourself is, what is my movie genre? And what is the timeline of my movie taking place? So as an example, here on the screen is a DVD cover for one of the most notable films in the world, Titanic. Now, as you guys may see on the cover has a very rustic vibe to it, presenting its 90s feel. Like, for example, you guys can see a classic horizon shot of the sunset in the back cover behind Jack and Rose. And there's also a very vibrant front cover of them, delivering a very romantic theme to the cover. Now once you've picked a background of your liking, it's time to move on to the different elements of your cover. But before you do anything, you're going to need to set up your file. So as you guys can see on the screen, I prepared a little blueprint that you guys can set your file dimensions to on Photoshop. You guys can pause the video if you want to set up your file or just copy it down. What I have here are three different sets of dimensions that you guys can use, with the first one being the DVD cover as an entirety. Now with these dimensions, with a width of 264mm and a height of 148mm, this is what you want to use if you're planning to put your spine, your front cover, and your back cover all in one Photoshop file. But let's say if you don't want to do that, you guys can also split the project into three different files, with each individual cover being a height of, once again, 148mm and a width of 126mm, and the spine being 12mm wide by 148mm tall. So after you guys have set up the dimensions of your file, you guys can essentially just figure out a rough outline of where you want to put the title of your movie and the cast names on your front cover. I'll go more into the text features in just a moment here. So after you get your elements done, we're going to move on to the features of your cover. So a main feature that is present on most covers are some logos. So for example, of these logos may be a Blu-ray logo, a movie rating logo, some sponsors or distributors. And after you inputted your logos, which preferably or mainly goes on the back cover, do you want to add some blending styles into your cover? I'll go more into these types of styles in the design tips. But some examples of these blending styles that you can apply on Photoshop are gradients, clipping masks, and some glows. And after you applied some styles, another thing you can ask yourself is, what font do I want to use to match my theme? As another example of these elements put together, as you guys can see on the screen, here's another notable film in the movie world, Jurassic Park. Now, at first glance, you guys can notice the cover is very intense with the coloration of red and the shades of black on the top. It's a very eye-opening cover. And also, front and center, as you guys can see, the dinosaur face, and the picture of the actors running and hiding from the dinosaurs in the background. This showcases the adventure genre of Jurassic Park. And once again, here's another version of the Titanic cover, which once again showcases the very rustic, vibrant, romantic feel of the movie. Also to mention, throughout this video, I'll be having a follow guide of one of the previous covers that I made last year for a movie project. So following the first step, as you guys can see, I already have a background set up for the movie, which was an adventure genre. And with the adventure genre background, I also laid out where I want to put my cast members, so pictures of them, the cast names, which will go on the top, and the title that will go front and center in the middle. So with the main background complete, onto the text and typography. Once again, I've created a graph dividing this section into 3 different categories of text that you guys will implement into your cover, with the first one and most importantly being your title. With your title, your most important goal to achieve is to make your title grasp the most attention. So, in order to do this, you guys should make your title a fairly large font. And while the title should have some sort of font style, it must also be legible. This essentially means that if someone's to be looking at your cover, they shouldn't struggle to read your title, or else all the attention will just disappear. And with legibility, your title should also be appropriate to your movie genre. As you guys can see from this example title from the movie The Purge, the style of lettering they have used on this cover has a very eerie vibe to it, as you guys can see with that sort of cracked type texture on the title. Very, very cryptic and dark. But let's say we erase this title and move on to something like this. No. This is an example of how, despite the title sounding cool, The Purge, this font just ruins the whole idea of fear in the movie, and just sort of removes all the seriousness away from this cover. So after picking out a font style that you guys want to use for your title, we can now move on to the credits. So the credits is basically the cast names being displayed on your front cover. Now, an important note to remember when putting your cast names on the front cover is you don't want to overdo it. So what this essentially means is, let's say you have your group of actors and some of the members only appear for like a 5 to 10 second background scene or something. So you wouldn't want to put their names on the official cover of your movie, as they aren't really that major and make people invest into watching your movie. So leave the cast names to mainly the protagonists or antagonists and the major supporting characters in your film. Another important thing to take note of is to not let your cast names overlook your title. Now, as you guys can see here, once again with the Titanic themed cover examples, let's say they never watched Titanic before, or a reader has never seen Titanic and they're looking at your cover. This is a situation where people will go, "Oh, Leonardo DiCaprio, the movie. Wait a second, this isn't the title of the movie." So, in order to prevent this, be sure to use a smaller font for your cast names to remove any confusion, so when people read your cover, they don't think your cast names is the title of your movie. So after placing the title and cast names on your front cover, let's move on to the back cover pieces, aka your subtext. Now, the main and most notable piece of text on your back cover is of course your synopsis. As you guys can see in the graph, I provided some simple fonts and basic effects that are available that you guys can use for your synopsis, such as drop shadows or a text box around your synopsis. But moving on to the actual synopsis itself, your main goal of your synopsis is of course to convince your audience to watch your film. So I've created a little outline here of pieces of information that you guys should include into your synopsis. With the first being just describing briefly the beginning scenes of your film, which essentially describes the setting of your movie. The next being introducing your main characters and giving the audience a brief description of the conflict in your movie. Now, of course, with mentioning all of these, you also want to keep in mind to not spoil your entire movie. So you want to keep your readers in mystery and probably developing some questions, as that's what will invest them into watching your movie, since they want answers to their questions. As an example for a synopsis, I'll be using the Hunger Games Catching Fire synopsis as an example, and how this synopsis reflects the tips I provided on the graph prior. So, as you guys can see on the screen, I've underlined some of the key details that the writer wrote in the synopsis, which gives readers essentially the general outline of this film. So, for example, what is the setting of the movie? After surviving the previous Hunger Games. Who are some of the main characters in this film? Katniss, Peeta, and President Snow. And there are also some details which makes questions that an audience who may have not watched this movie before may be asking. So, a rebellion? igniting another Hunger Games. So questions may be asked: what's this rebellion? Who will win the next Hunger Games? And what will this big change be? And with all the text inputted into your cover, so for example on the follow guide, here's the title, the distributors on the bottom, and the cast names on the top, we can now move on to the design tips of your cover to make it more appealing. Now, one of the main and most difficult things that people want to implement onto their cover are pictures of their cast members. So the main thing people ask is, how do I crop out people? So I provided methods that are available on both Photoshop Elements and Photoshop on the Mac and Photoshop CS6. So starting off with Photoshop Elements, which is essentially just a down version of Mac and Photoshop CS6. Some methods that you can use to crop out people from your pictures are the Quick Selection tool, which essentially just highlights a specific area so you can copy it into a new layer. A Magic Wand tool, which just, if you click, let's say, on a specific space, it'll highlight that specific space so you can also put it on a new layer. And the Lasso tool, which is a tool that you can use to surround a specific area in order to put it onto a new layer. So essentially just bordering an image. But if you guys have access to Mac Photoshop or Photoshop CS6, what I like to use is the pen tool, which is probably the most precise, but it's also kind of tedious, because this is a tool where you have to essentially put dots all around a specific image in order to put it on a new layer. So after cropping out your people and putting them into a specific position on your cover, we can move on to text effects just to design text so they don't look too basic on the cover, just to make them more appealing. So you guys can click on the tab style settings on Photoshop Elements or blending options if you have access to CS6. This just provides a list of little effects that you guys can add to your text. So for example, drop shadows, which essentially darkens the background of your text, inner or outer glows. So for example, you can add probably a neon glow to your text, or clipping mask, which is essentially, like example on the Purge cover, just adds a little texture to the background of your text. So after applying all those styles and different types of effects on your text, we can move on to visual appeal, which is essentially just minor refinements to your cover. So examples of styles or effects that you guys can add: smoke, if you guys want to put it on probably the borders or the background of your cast members. Particles, for example, that neon glow, that blue type thing, which you guys can put at the back of your text. Some gradients, which is essentially just different colorations on your cover, or burn tools just to darken some images. And that is the design tips done. So moving back to the follow guide, as you guys can see on the left side of the screen, here is the finished product of the cover that was being made throughout this whole video. So as you guys can see, the cast members in the middle behind the title, and also some green particles and some fades around that sword thing in the middle, which makes it just more appealing and gives it more attention. And also on the right side of the screen, you can see a previous cover that I made for another film last year called The Prophecy of the Future. So for this cover, I just went for a black and white grayscale type of theme with the smoke at the bottom and the white glows on the side of the title. So with that being said, hope you guys enjoyed this video, and hopefully you learned some new tips and tricks on how to make your own DVD cover for your movie. So hope this tutorial helped, and good luck to you guys on making your covers. Take care everyone.